Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon. Could I invite my fellow panelists onto the stage? Miss Dina Zaman, DCP dengan Saudara Thomas. So is everybody okay? Everybody had their lunch? Yes, it counts for the subdued tone of the room right now, which means this will be an easier session, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to our session this afternoon, which is a little bit of a heavy topic, to talk about some of the root causes of extremism and to provide some ideas as to how the work in dealing and countering or responding or even understanding some of these issues that have led to radicalization and also in its manifestation of extremism that we've seen that has actually emerged of late. And what we see over the past 2 decades or so emerge from the issues of racial and religious politics under the guise of equality. Obviously, this is not something that is unique to Malaysia. It is something that's been grappled by many countries around the world. It certainly is something that we're able to see the consequences of, especially when we have the memories of the Bali bombings, for example. Something that's, despite it being almost 2 decades ago, it's something that's still fresh, and we remember the consequences of that. We have with us today some really interesting panelists for whom I think at the end of it we'll have quite a few questions that I'm hoping that they will be willing to take and to be able to address. I hope you don't mind me being a little bit of a rough and tumble with you to this afternoon, because this issue really requires us to be frank and honest about some of the issues that we are confronted with today. So with us we have, and I'll go down as much as possible, their background is, first of all, the Principal Assistant Director for the Special Branch Counter-Terrorism Division of the Royal Malaysian Police. We have with us Deputy Commissioner of Police Norma Ishak, who has been with the PDRM for the past 3 decades. Are you sure it's 3 decades? You don't look like you've been with us 3 decades. You can tell when somebody loves their job, they look younger. So she started her career in PDRM in 91, serving as a desk officer for the Far East in the External Intelligence Division of the Special Branch. After serving for 12 years in counter-espionage and counter-intelligence work, she later was transferred to the Protective Security Division, where she was deeply involved in protection work in a number of areas. She was transferred to the Counter-Terrorism Division back in 2016 as an assistant director, and subsequently was promoted to her current position, which is the lead of the Counter-Terrorism Division. So certainly, when it comes to the Malaysian Police, we definitely have the right person with us today. Welcome, DCP. We also with us, we have another colleague who has been very much with the struggle or fight on terrorism. We have with us Mr. Thomas Karus Samuel, who is at present the Regional Consultant for Terrorism Prevention with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, or UNODC. He was previously with, how do you actually pronounce this? I never... What? Siasat, the Southeast Asia Regional Center for Counter-Terrorism. I've always pronounced it as CIRC for some reason, which is under the purview of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, and now he is currently doing his PhD and his research centers around the radicalization pathways of young people. So welcome, Thomas. And last but not least, We are honored to have with us Ms. Dina Zaman, who I haven't seen in almost, 2 years now, I think? Wait, no, 2 years, 2 years. Who is the director of Iman Research. Dina is known to the public as a columnist and writer. Her real life sees her in the past 6 years as a co-founder of Iman Research, which focuses on regional protective security, whose pillars are society, beliefs, and perception. She is, I believe, currently writing a collection of essays on Malay identity and wants to write on her family history. So welcome, Dina. And we're looking forward to your next book. So make sure reserve copy for everyone here in the room. So ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. We have 3 good speakers who are going to be talking to us a little bit about radicalism. We're going to talk about the effects of extremism, and most importantly, how it relates back to the situation we see here in Malaysia, where we talk about racial and religious identity politics. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the floor for your first few minutes to the DCP. Please go ahead.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Peace be upon you and very good afternoon to all. Thank you for inviting me to this session. Today I would like to talk about racism and how it can impact my work as a police officer and the society at large. Okay, just click next. Oh, they are having trouble, not me. I see. Okay.
They could have removed the text.
I have to wait because of Zoom. They cannot follow. Okay. All right. Okay. I will start with this slide. So when someone is nearing death, what will he or she give as the last advice or will before the final breath? In our case, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave a few advices as his last sermon, and one of them focused exactly on the origin of mankind. He clearly mentioned that all mankind is from Adam and Eve. Therefore, an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over black, nor a black has any superiority over white, except by piety and good action. Why this is one of the items mentioned in his last sermon? Because racism is forbidden in Islam, and mankind is judged only by his piety and good actions. In the Quran, chapter 49, verse 13, Allah the Almighty said, "The creation of male and female, and the division of many nations, tribes and sub-tribes, is for the purpose of better identification, so we may know one another beyond our community and to celebrate our diversity." It is forbidden to take pride or degrade others on the basis of his skin pigment, amount of wealth, rank and social status, and also pedigree. False and foolish notions of superiority, racial arrogance, or national conceit is a sign of absolute ignorance. There are many factors that make racism such an evil threat to mankind. One of them is to breed injustice, which can turn into discriminatory act. Islam promotes justice and fairness. Thus, you must treat everyone with due cost, regardless of who they are. Quran chapter 4, verse 135 mention about upholding justice before your own interest. As a police officer, I have to uphold justice even when the offender is my mother or my siblings. If they are wrong, they are wrong. Quran chapter 5, verse 8 to 10 emphasize that justice must be delivered, even against your enemy. Do not let your hatred against certain group of people hold you from doing justice to them. The Creator of mankind clearly showed us what justice is by telling us not to do injustice, even as much as an atom's weight. Two principles just now: justice against your own interest. This is justice against your enemy. Allah the Most Merciful described this in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 40. However, if the good deed is as much as an atom's weight, the deed will still be rewarded. This is the principle of fairness and really motivate me to practice good day in my day-to-day work. Even if I pick up a nail on the road to prevent someone from having a flat tire, in which the deed is so small, and yet it will be rewarded, as justice is the foundation for fairness, while injustice will breed discrimination. Quran chapter 2, verse 119, required us to be in moderation, even when defending oneself against an attack. Restrain yourself from excessive violent action, as Islam does not promote aggression. This is the fact in the Quran. In chapter 5, verse 32, Islam forbids killings of persons unless in retribution for murder or spreading of corruption in the land. The unjustified killing of man is equated as if he kills all mankind, while if he saves or protects a life, as if he saved the life of all mankind. As law enforcer and protector of the people, I am obligated to ensure I treated everyone in fairness. In our work, fairness means do not overcreate the threat. All arrests must be based on facts and hard evidence. From the point of arrest, every suspect will be treated according to the stipulated protocols and rights accorded to them. And I find this very enriching as a winnable solution when it comes to the time to rehabilitate them. The action-reaction philosophy will come to fruition when you are given due respect by your former suspect because you have done the same to him during the remand period. Quran chapter 5, verse 87, we are taught not to be transgressor. As intelligent species on this earth, we are governed by both divine law and human law. Even if the law is written by human beings for the benefit of mankind, then we must abide to the rule of law, especially when dealing with the right of suspect. All human beings are the creation of God, thus they must be treated with fairness. In our case, the use of force must commensurate with the level of threat posed by the individual to the society. There are already many protocols or Inspector General standing orders to govern our conduct. In handling terrorism case, Security Offences Special Measure Act 2012 or SOSMA is the procedural law that governs police conduct against the suspect of security offence. If we violate the procedures, our case can become invalid and thrown out of court. The only advantage of SOSMA is it allows 28 days of remand compared to 14 days under the Criminal Procedure Code. I always emphasize to my officers that we must enhance our investigation skill from time to time so that we do not have to utilize the whole remand period but completed our investigation as early as possible. But this is easier said than done. To convert intelligence into hard evidence alone will sometimes take months and years to gather the right evidence, especially in terrorism financing cases. We are doing our best to improve and expecting support from the society to encourage and motivate us. After all, we are human too and subject to the same divine and human law. Even in war, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, commanded not to kill a child, a woman, an old person, a sick person, a monk or a priest, those who surrender and those who run away. Do not cut a tree, destroy a temple or church, or destroy a building and disfigure the dead. Do not kill an animal except for sustenance and be good to prisoners and feed them. Do not enforce Islam to non-Muslims. The same principle must be used when dealing with suspect of terrorism. In another dimension, from the perspective of nationhood, Quran chapter 60 verse 8 said, Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of your religion, and do not expel you from your home, from being righteous towards them, and acting justly toward them. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly. Next, Quran chapter 49 verse 9 teaches us the correct approach to reconciliation and its positive consequences. When in disagreement, always promote peaceful settlement. Fight the one that act wrongfully against the other. If they repent, accept them, and put up a reconciliation plan that is just between them. Allah loves those who act justly. When we talk about reconciliation of the offender of terrorism, we need to have clarity of mind that in order to be successful, we must show genuine mercy on them with customized module that fit the needs of their body and soul. Talk and discuss any issues with respect and treat them with dignity. In our counter-terrorism strategy, we fully utilize our threat management program, which is the full cycle of our work. The sweetness of this program is turning your former enemy into friend once they have completed the prison sentence, and continue to provide the support system even as small as lending them our ears. Fairness is not equality. It is the state of being fair and impartial, taking into consideration the natural law or right. From this slide, how do you rate your level of fairness? Fairness is the ability to see the circumstances in the right context and perspective. Without this acumen in your judgment, you will end up doing injustice to others. If we wanted to treat everyone equally, we may end up being unfair in our decisions. The teacher or trainer in this class of animals said for a fair selection, everybody has to sit for the same examination that is climbing the tree behind them. In this case, the monkey has more benefits than the others, as climbing tree is what monkey does. The fish will have no chance of surviving unless there is special flying fish tank for the fish to use to climb the tree. In the final analysis, racism breeds discrimination and injustice, in which all of them are enablers of extremism. In human realm, extremist groups are divided into both left and right. Both sides display similarity in political and psychological style, the treatment of political opponents, and the tactics that they are willing to employ to achieve their ends. They display many parallels that can rightly be labeled authoritarian, and we are not one of them. If we plot the situation in Malaysia, we will get a bell curve chart where the masterclass extremists are located at both ends of the bell curve. We are in the middle of the bell and can be considered the majority, but unfortunately very weak. Therefore, we keep pursuing these masterclass extremists every now and then because we are so well conditioned to let them lead our life into permanent misery. Last but not least, let me tell you the similarity of masterclass extremists from both sides of the bell curve. Both tend to support or oppose civil liberties in a highly partisan and self-serving manner. Both support freedom for themselves and for the groups and causes they favor. Both refrain it from enemies and advocates of causes they dislike or disadvantageous to them. When evaluated against the standard left and right ideological dimension, they are positioned at opposite ends of the political spectrum. Extremists from militancy ideology resemble them in nature, but most of the time advocates violence. The masterclass extremists, they portray themselves as non-violent, but they are as dangerous as the terrorists. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DCP Norma. There's quite a number of questions that I want to ask, so I hope she's prepared.
Oh,
We'll have it later?
ask now?
No, we have it later.
Oh,
So
okay.
we'll go through the presentations first, and then we'll go to the questions. So I do hope you have questions for later on. Please, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for DCP Norma. I just wanted to remind our viewers who are on Zoom and Facebook right now that please do ask your questions on the chat box so that we can get them and ask them to our panelists here. And please not be shy about asking those questions. Please do send them on the chat function. So for our next speaker, we have with us, as mentioned, Ms. Dina Zaman. So you have your minutes. Please, floor is yours.
Hi, Assalamualaikum everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Dina from Iman Research. Okay, let's just wait for the slides. All right. So I'll give you a little bit of a history about my research, which I did last year, and it's ongoing. I'm pretty quite, I'm quite proud of the presentation because I thought it looked good. But anyway, I was very fascinated since 2018 when Pakatan Harapan, won. When I noticed a few things, the rise of Malay nationalism, and it wasn't the ISMA type of nationalism. It was very, very different, and I thought, okay, why don't I just look at this trend? So I call these the Tanjak boys. Some of them are friends, the Silat boys and all that. But I'll give you a little bit of a story here. Okay. Is that moving? Right. Okay. Next slide. Yeah. All right. So I started noticing these boys wearing the Tanja, the Malay outfit in 2018, especially during the anti-ISID rally. And I was wondering, okay, why are they here and what was this anti-ISID rally about? I wasn't in Malaysia then. And there were photos on Facebook, and I saw some friends of mine who I thought were oppositionists. They used to work, I will not name names, they used to work for a non-Malay political party, and suddenly they were all wearing a tanja and demanding, Malay rights, not Muslim rights. So I thought, apa kejadah ni? Why are you doing this? But I was away. And when I came back, I had a few discussions. Why did you do this? He said, yes, we voted for a new government, but it was only when the new government was set up we realized that, oh my God, there were just way too many non-Malay faces governing us. There goes our Malay identity, not even Islamic identity. So I thought, all right, okay, let's hear a few things. And, one of the things that they said was that, when you talk to these Tanjak boys, right, what does it mean to live in a multicultural Malaysia? They said, we're fine with that. We like that we have a masyarakat majmuk, but it has to be on their terms. And what do you mean by that? The non-Malays, they've made a lot of money. That's fine. They can have all that. They can have the money, they can have the economic power, but they cannot have religious or ethnic power in the country. So I thought, okay, why don't I expand this conversation? So I did this during the MCO last year when we were allowed to, I didn't do it during the lockdowns and all that, and I found it rather fascinating. So initially, hang on, trying to get, okay, is that working? I'm not very good at technology. Okay, yeah. So these are the boys from Bangsa Bertauhid. I tried reaching out to them on Instagram. They refused to entertain me, but I followed them. Initially, I thought, okay, this is very interesting. They wanted to be, very, very independent. They said, look, we do not have to depend on the Malay government for our livelihoods. We will create our own, enterprises and businesses. And I thought, okay, that's pretty good. You're independent. You're not relying on anyone. You're creating your little magazines, your T-shirts, and all. Initially, there was a lot of posturing. This tanja, dark, young men. They wanted to look cool and hip. But when I talked to a lot of academics and researchers, they said, if they're really, really Malay, why are they wearing tanja and not, in a T-shirt and jeans? They're not real Malays. But I thought, okay it's a modern world. They did a lot of things, and a lot of the work they do, like the businesses they did, maybe 30%, 15% will go to Malay charity. Okay. So what I managed to gauge was that they were very pro-Malay, right? Because they said, look, we have had enough of the government dictating what our race, our identity should be. So we're grabbing this back. We feel that the Malayness that we are experiencing right now is an Arabization of of Malay identity, and we're anti-Salafi Wahhabi. Hence, this is why we're doing what you're doing. The only way we can wrest back this power is through entrepreneurship. And when you have this tanja, pakai baju Melayu and all that, it gives you an identity. Everyone looks at you, you look very segar, and it also gives you direction, hala tuju in life. And one of the things which when I looked at Instagram and all these many tanja punya groups, right? They were always mentoring or scolding the young kids. You have no direction in life. You're not even studying for school. You are just being a mess to your families. Follow the Malay way and you'll go with this. And I met a lot of people. Like one is Tengku Ahmad Ridauddin. who is doing a PhD at ISTAC. You know, he used to be very, very secular, very, very westernized in his thinking. And then he said, you know, one day I fell in love with a Chris, and that totally changed me from a disco-loving Malay guy to someone who says, look, I have to go back being Malay. That's who I am. I don't even speak, you know, Bahasa Malaysia. Interestingly enough, when I conducted all these interviews with the Tanjak boys, it was all done in English. No one spoke to me in Malay. So I thought, no, pelik benar ni, but, you know, whatever goes, can. So I'm here to just get the stories out. Okay. There were some noticeable strands, yeah? One I mentioned earlier about this anti-Salafi Wahhabi sentiment. Two, everything they were saying, look, we've been colonized by the Arabs, but before we were colonized by the white masters. We can't have that anymore. So there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of arguments about our history books, how we think, we're all being programmed and, influenced by the British. Two, there's a lot of publications. I own quite a few just to see what's going on. There's been a spike on books on Perubatan Melayu, not Perubatan Islam, which is known as Ruqyah. A lot of, things like, well, some can be quite amusing, like how to do, Santau, your enemy, and all that stuff. But the fact is that the rise of these books, which is being sold at Shopee, Lazada, you get a lot of these, right? Shows that there's a market here where people are saying, we need to get this back. Perubatan Ruqyah ni Arab, tak boleh. You have to do Melayu. And the Malay world is where we all live with spirits. It's interesting because, I hope you don't judge me, Azrul. I actually joined a Tendai group just to see what it was all about. So, okay, there goes my credibility, but so what? I learned how to meditate the Malay way. 21 hari, pening pala I tau. Subuh, Isyak, 21 hari. It was actually quite tame lah, nothing happened. I didn't fly anywhere, But then they added me to a Telegram group. And it was just utterly fascinating when you see Malay professionals of all ages, right? Believing in like macam Ugama Ibu Yati. I think you all are quite familiar, right, with that woman who professed that Ugama Malaysia is not Ugama Islam but Ugama Melayu. And I just thought, wow, this is like a subcategory of Malays that I don't know. They spoke English, they spoke Malay. But what I saw, apart from the fact that, they wanted energy for jodoh, for kekayaan and all that, was that you said, this group makes us feel very Malay. And, I'm still on that group, and I'm thinking, okay, it shows one thing. The fact is that they feel that the state has failed them, that they have to create this. And you can call it bid'ah, you can call this crazy, but they're taking back and saying, we are going to create our own identity that our ancestors had. Why are we wearing jubah when we can wear baju Melayu? Why don't you wear baju kurung? So that's the conversation. And, there's a lot more local ustads, not the famous ones like Don Daniel or Azhar Idrus, who are creating little subgroups in Facebook. Yes, I'm in a couple of them, who are actually telling us that, okay, this is how you Malays have to do. You're going to baca Al-Fatihah this way to stop your enemies. Now, initially it sounds very okay lah, it's very Melayu, nothing's going to happen. But as I started following, right, you start seeing the narrative changing, And some of the things which we picked up on Twitter, in Telegram groups, and also in Facebook was that, okay, I think in the next GE, PAS will get, maybe, I'm just quoting what I'm seeing, yeah? While many young Malays don't feel that PAS is speaking on their behalf, they say, who else is very Malay? Now, there's a bit of a danger here, but let me just get to the next point. ISMA is co-opting this identity. So and you have to realize, sorry, Sharul, I know you're from Ikram, but when you look at the history of Jim, Ikram and Isma share the same mother but different fathers, okay? One's totally Islamist, and the other one's pro-Malay. But at the end of the day, Isma's roots are Islamist. But they are co-opting this Tanjak punya dressing. And you're seeing this now, and you're going, now this is very fascinating. You don't even like us Malays, and yet you are wearing a Tanjak. And, a lot of us are very naive in that sense when you start thinking, hey, everyone's supporting this identity. without realizing that people are actually going to hijack your narrative, yeah? Two, you see the insidious ways of people moving, We're seeing that there's a lot of, when you do this business, right? Food businesses. We know that one food business that's based in Taman Tun, the owner is, contributing financially to Hizbut Tahrir that's based in Indonesia. So we're going, okay, but everyone's so happy lah because everyone's wearing baju kurung, the tanja and all. One thing that I learned, that I got from a friend was that, all these years, this person said to me, was that all these years, we Malays have been told, this is bid'ah, this is wrong, everything is wrong, right? And all in the spirit of modernization, commercialization. Everybody wanted to be that, successful Muslim. That now the reason why we're turning back to this, however crazy this sounds, is because we've just realized we don't have an identity. That's why we're doing what we're doing. Next.
Dina, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Now, let's not talk about buy Muslim first. Basically, the whole thing is about being Muslim first. Push back against the state. So there's a lot of videos that's circulating on Facebook. This was quite a very arousing Facebook video, but it was done quite well. In fact, if you look at YouTube, when you look at far right, interesting groups, right? They have the money. Someone once asked me, who funds ISMA? Who funds all these far right nationalists? Is it not Saudi? It's not Saudi. These people have money. They're all professionals. They speak English. They're cleverer than all of us, So they fund. When you join these groups, 30% of your income goes into the activities. It's what you call bai'ah. So this is how you get all these videos, right? And now they're saying this. They're not exactly attacking non-Muslims or non-Malays. They're just saying, look, everyone say kita orang Melayu pemalas. Kita gagal dalam ekonomi. Now what are you going to do about this? So you see all this, right? Now, let me see this. Sorry, I'm a bit blind. So these are some of the things that happened last year during the MCO. Some of you probably saw the webinar. There's a little group there called Maksa. That is actually ISMA's subsidiary. They're working with non-Malays. Now, I spoke to some people who are in faith-based organizations. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because I'm curious, right? We have two common enemies. Okay, what are your common enemies then? One is the current government because it's so dysfunctional, all right? Two, LGBT. Oh, then I said, look, I know we all have problems here, but when you are very naive about your alliances, do you know what will happen to your work then? It doesn't matter. We have two common enemies, and these people are really, really slick. You should see them on LinkedIn. Okay, I know I've got 2 more minutes, right? Okay. So, hang on, yeah? Okay, I'm Barney. So this is something you probably saw. That little cartoon is me. I was totally stressed last year because I thought, my God, all of this is happening during MCO. I'm not saying they have terrorist ties or links, but the fact that we are in danger of toxic nationalism are being, further pushed to the forefront. And do we actually realize what we're doing? I'll give you an example. Whenever we give charity, when we donate to charity, do we know where the money is going to? A lot of people don't know. Okay, last one. Okay, so the similarities between the two is this. The fact is they say this. You know what? There is a lack of Malay identity. We have to wrest this back from the modern Malays, from the whatever Malays. And the narrative that I was getting from both these groups was this. It's working class against the elite Malays. Because they feel that the elite Malays have failed them. You should hear what they say about the so-called government, even though this government says, look, we are all for the Malays. They're fed up because no one's taking care of them. Two, the lack of low social capital. I've spoken to them and said, what are you talking about, low social capital? You live in a link house in, Kela, maybe it's in Lucky Gardens, but it's still Bangsa. It's still, Bangi. You have a home. What are you talking about, social capital? The fact is, he said, we don't feel good enough for even our own country. Everyone else, whether we like the non-Malays or not, they are actually confident. What about us? 60 years. You're talking about 60 years of, of independence, and the confidence is not there. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm hoping for you all to ask questions. But this is what I've been working on for the past 1 year, and that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. And certainly there are quite a number of interesting points that you raised, and we'll go into that later during the Q&A. I'm actually dying to ask them now, but I have to hold myself. We go to our next and final speaker for the opening statement. Mr. Thomas, please, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Azrul, my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank Komas, Pusat Komas, for giving me this invitation to share some thoughts on racism and extremism. I come from a background where I look into terrorism, conventional terrorism, extremism, and I want to share, and so I'm looking at it from that perspective. And I want to share what's my starting point. So we were looking at non-violent yet radical groups. So these are groups which profess very radical ideology, but they're not violent. Let me give you an example. We have groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, mentioned by Dina earlier, in which, for example, Hizb ut-Tahrir, some of the Hizb ut-Tahrirs in certain countries, they call for a caliphate, ranging from southern Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, southern Philippines, but they say that they are not advocating violence to get there. They are suggesting that, look, we can use our peaceful means to actually achieve this purpose. So there is a school of thought which says, look, there's nothing wrong with that. Let these guys speak. Are they actually talking about violence? They're not speaking about violence. And some of the police authorities in many countries abroad, they say, look, we can't prosecute them because what they have is a radical idea. They have yet to do anything wrong. It's cognitive at the mental level. It doesn't exhibit or manifest itself at the outward stage. They're not doing anything wrong. Should we be worried? So some, as I mentioned, they believe in the idea of safety valve. Let these guys talk. Let them talk. Let them vent out. Let them vent out their frustration. I mean, as long as they are not doing anything wrong, as long as they're not breaking any law, that's okay. There's another school of thought, the conveyor belt. You know, when you go to the airport, right, you start off with the conveyor belt, your bag starts from one end, and it moves along the way until it reaches you. So this group says, look, these guys start off being mentally radical. Cognitively, they're radicalized, and then it's just a matter of time before at least some of them graduate to do acts of violence. So we need to be careful. Certain worldviews, even when held without advocating violence, provides the mood music that encourages terrorist acts. That's Ed Hussein, who was at one point with Hizb ut-Tahrir. So he's saying, look, we got to be careful about them. Abu Bakr Bashir, one of my friends interviewed him, and he said this to my friend. He said this, I'm only a craftsman selling knives. I'm not responsible for how those knives are used. So he was basically saying, you know, the government, Indonesian government is saying, calling me a terrorist. I'm an elderly man. What can I possibly do to anybody? So this point of view is suggesting that, look, these guys have radical ideas, but they're not doing anything which is violent. Should we be concerned about them? Now, in my field, we say, yes, we should be concerned about them because it starts off with the mind. And then it's just a matter of time before at least some of them will graduate into doing violent action. And it is from that point that I want to pivot into racial discrimination. Now, this is the ICET definition for racial discrimination. And I want to look at racial discrimination from that point of view. I would like to suggest that racist actions stem from racist ideas. This is departing from my earlier point, which is violent extremist ideas actually start off in the mind before it actually translates into becoming action. So how do you kill an idea? Is it through legislation? And earlier one of the speakers was mentioning, yes, you need legislation, you know. Is it through punishment, punitive, you know? In schools, if somebody has a racist thoughts, you beat the fella. That's what my parents used to go through. You know? Beat the chap, beat the badness out of him. And in my case, it actually worked. But the idea here is, can we do it through coercion? And I would like to suggest that it's not foolproof. One of the best, and especially when you're talking about today's young people, one of the best ways to counter or defeat an idea is through another idea. So to prove this point, we looked at this premise here: non-violence as a strategy to address grievances. So we did a quantitative survey, approximately 9,600 respondents from Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Philippines. And so the premise was this: there are successful alternatives to violence in order to address grievances. Now, the majority of the people says yes, they believe it could be possible that there are successful alternatives. The majority of the people in all these 5 countries said the same thing. Then the next question we asked them is, look, our premise is this: people are unaware of the numerous alternatives to violence in order to address grievances. That means people don't know any other way. And again, the majority of young people in the 5 countries said, yes, we don't know what are the ways to address violence. And then we gave them a third premise. If people were aware of the alternatives to address injustice, there is a possibility that fewer people would resort to violence. This was a very powerful finding. If people know that there are other alternatives to actually achieve something, they would give violence up. In the same way, could it be possible that if there is another way besides having those thoughts, which we might consider to be racial, but they consider to be normal, if there is another way, would there be a possibility that whom we deem to be racist would actually give up these racist thoughts? So I would like to suggest developing ideas to counter and defeat the narrative or story of racism. I work a lot with young people, and one of the best ways to work with them is through stories. Now, why are people racist? Now, I do not even pretend to be an expert in this. So I asked a lot of young people, why are people racist? And they gave me some ideas. Number 1, generational prejudice. Number 2, ignorance. Number 3, fear. Number 4, distorted reality. Number 5, past hurts. Number 6, societal pressure to conform. And number 7, apathy. I do apologize. I'm going a little bit fast because I want to keep the time. We need to challenge this narrative. Now I'm going to go one by one. Generational prejudice. So many people have told me this. Look, this is what my parents taught me. My parents taught me that if you see a snake or an Indian person, kill the snake, beat the snake. Many people have told me this before. So this is what my parents taught me. And it could be indoctrination through education. Many a times we find this, not just in Malaysia, but in many parts of the world, where we have good content, but the people who are actually presenting that content, we have a problem there. And so how do we overcome this? We need to develop critical thinking. The idea and premise we put up to young people is this: I grew up with this, but I'm not going to go on with this. So yes, I admit, I might have grown up with this, but it stops here. So what could precipitate this change of mindset? Contact theory. Meaning to say that if you expose people to others of different races, cultures, and religions, there is a chance they could learn, get to know, and things could change. Exposure, which is somewhat what contact theory talks about. The immorality of prejudice. For some group of people, you can actually tell them, look, this is a bad idea. It's a wrong idea. It's an immoral idea. For some people, that argument works. For the other kinds of people, we need to tell them, look, racism is irrational. It does not make logical sense. So for different crowds, different audiences, you need to have a different way to reach out to them. Ignorance. Some people are not exposed and genuinely do not know. They might be brought up in a certain race, culture, mindset. They do not know anything else but that. They're not bad, just that they do not know. So we tell them it's okay to not have known, but it's not okay to continue not to know. So in the past, if you say, look, I don't know. But now, in the 21st century, you can no longer go with that excuse. With the internet, with social media, you need to know. You need to know what are your friends' beliefs. One of the things that we always do with young people is we call them, and I work with groups of different races. And sometimes I go to my church and I ask this, okay, look, everybody take out your handphones. Now scroll down on your contact list. Scroll down on the contact list. Now tell me how many of that percentage of people in your contact list are Malays, are Chinese, are Indians?
Thomas, 5 minutes.
Sorry?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. How many people are of different races? And there you can immediately tell. How is it possible that a non-Malay living in Malaysia has less than 5% of their contact list being Malays? Meaning that there is a huge possibility they're going out of their way not to have Malay friends. It could be that, but it needs to change. So here there's a Malay saying, tak kenal maka tak cinta. And we are trying to suggest, look, you got to know and you will realize that, look, they have many things to offer. Fear. If we accept others, what will happen to us? I hear this oftentimes. Who will protect and promote our race, our culture, our religion, our way of life? We need to show them that accepting others and respecting them enriches our own language or culture or race or very way of life. And we are big enough. The race, the culture, the religion, as some earlier speakers said, 5,000 years, 2,000 years, we are big enough to accommodate the other and yet remain true to our God-given identity. Distorted reality. Again and again I hear this. Look, they will take our opportunities, These guys will take our wealth. These guys will take our job. More for them, meaning more for the other, means less for us. We need to expose these lies about the other. We need to build champions of the other within our communities. It's so important to do that. Case studies of benefits of diversity. We show them, So we show them it's not just dividing that which we can see. That means this is the wealth we have. This is a limited finite resource. We have to divide this among all of us. No, it's not that. But creating that which we can dream. As a Malay, as a Sabahan, as a Sarawakian, as an Indian, we can do and we can create and make things even more. One of the biggest reasons for racism is past hurts. Hurt people. People who have been hurt will go on to hurt others. Once bitten, twice shy. So we need to recognize that we have been hurt and we need to recognize the power of forgiveness. More and more I'm beginning to see that is the essence. And if we can pass these hurts by forgiveness, we can go a long way. I wish I had more time to give you a case studies, but unfortunately, the rule of truth and reconciliation, very, very important for us to move on. Societal pressure to confirm. You can no longer be part of us if you are willing to accept them. We need to teach young people the need to stand for what is right and, if necessary, to stand for it alone. And we need to acknowledge that, yes, you can make a difference even if you're one. And, if necessary, give them case studies of courage to show and teach them real people who have stood up for that which was right. Let them know that that such people do exist. Apathy, the unholy trinity, I, me and myself. It doesn't affect me and I don't care. Look, I'm benefiting from all this. I am privileged, I have an education, I can speak English, I'm benefiting from this. So what do I care if others don't benefit? We need to move away from there. You were designed for more than just yourself, and this is the truth we constantly tell our young people. Look, you cannot just be asking for blessings for yourself, but you can be a channel of blessing to others. To teach responsibility, compassion, and empathy. All these have points by itself. I'm so sorry, I didn't have time. Points to ponder. We need to develop common spaces to build unity. It could be schools, it could be sports, it could be online. We need to discourage hate speech. We need to build alliances, and that would mean working with people beyond those which we are comfortable with. The importance of kindness, the importance of empathy, the importance of forgiveness, the importance, and all this goes to show that racism, we have more to lose than to gain. Now I'm going to end with this. Azrul, could I just have 1 minute, please? 30 seconds. I'm going to end with this. Can we just play that video? He's a white supremacist, yeah? Do you have volume? Okay, let me just tell you what the video is. He's a white supremacist, and basically he had led a very horrible life. And I asked him, Arno, how did you change? He said, Thomas, an interesting thing happened to me. I like the Big Mac burger. He's an American. It's okay. I think we'll just skip the video. So he told me that one day, he was very young, he went to this McDonald's restaurant, and he's basically a 6'7" He's full with tattoos, of all this. He's basically a white supremacist. So he goes to this McDonald's and he asks, and this McDonald's is a very unique McDonald's. It's in America, and it's only staffed by senior citizens. And this lady at the cashier was an African American, his purported enemy, and he's feeling very uncomfortable. So he goes there, and this elderly lady smiles at him, and he's getting more and more uncomfortable. He says, Thomas, I feel so uncomfortable. She must know what kind of person I am. She should not be smiling at me. She should know I'm her enemy. And you know, he had his hand in his pocket, and he orders the Big Mac, he gets the Big Mac, and then he says, I feel a bit uncomfortable because there's a swastika on my middle finger. And I suddenly feel so ashamed of the swastika, you know, and my hand's in the pocket, I don't know what to do. So I just grab my hand out, I take give the money, I throw the money at her, take the burger, and put it back into my hand. But before I could do all that, this lady gets hold of my hand, and this old lady, who can be my grandmother, looks at me and says, young man, you have all these tattoos on you, but you have a beautiful heart inside. And he says, I was stuck. I felt so uncomfortable. I ran out of the McDonald's shop, and from that day onwards, I could not sleep properly. Because why was this lady showing me kindness? And you know, that was the start of his change to actually change. He goes around now, around the world, preaching about how racism is wrong. It was kindness that changed his whole outlook to life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. For a while there, I thought we were at pulpit at your church. Sounds like it came from... But these are all strong words and messages that are going out, and how we can actually diffuse and de-radicalize. I think it resonates with many of us here. So we come to our Q&A session. I would like to just encourage for those who are online to ask your questions through the chat. But also for those who are here in this room, if you would like to ask a question, please just go up to the mic, just introduce yourself and your question. And please make it a short question and not a mini drama, please. So let me just start off by asking a pretty obvious question when we come to discussions like this. We seem to be talking a lot about radicalism, extremism within the context of the Malay Muslim community in Malaysia. And we don't seem to be talking about any other. So is it a Malay problem? Is it something that within the context of Malaysia, it seems that only Malays or Muslims or Malay Muslims are leaning towards this? And I would like to ask our colleague DCP Norma to answer that.
I don't think so. This is only a Malay problem. This is humankind problem everywhere in the world, even in US. Just recently, you can see the problem. Racism is forbidden in Islam because all the bad consequences it can cause. So it's about human being not accepting the facts that we are from the same source. Even we have different skin pigment, our face are different. Even I look like Chinese. So when growing up, people try to talk to me, a Malay person talk to me like I'm a Chinese. So why is that? So this is not a Malay problem. This is not non-Malay problem. It's not a Muslim problem, non-Muslim problem. It's a humankind problem. We, the human, are so, ignorant about our origins. Thank you.
Thank you. And perhaps, Dina?
I wouldn't say it's a Malay-Muslim problem, but because of my work, I tend to focus on that. So it would seem as this, but it's not. It's a global problem. And that's because, you look at what's happening in Sweden, you look at what's happening in Denmark, in America, Malaysia, everywhere around the world. I think this is a problem because resources are becoming scarcer, right? Now, when you look at, Trump's America then, why did he get so much, support for someone who is, orange-headed, insensible, racist and all? Why did he garner so much support and love from, the grassroots Americans? Simply because they actually believed that he would enrich them, and they actually were, basically working-class Americans. What you're seeing, and I've been seeing this, though, whether it's a theory that's, I always feel that the root of all this is about a class divide. The fact that it's, there's low social capital. When you look at terrorists, when you talk to people in JI or ISIS, why do you do the things that you do, right? At the root of it is because, one, of course, they want an Islamic state, but two, when you core and dig and out, they all say this: I want to be acknowledged. I want to, feel good about myself. And your idea of an Islamic state or heaven, it's not the what I want. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. I know it sounds rather frou-frou, because when you talk about, racism, terrorism, there are, deeper things to dig. But at the end of it, superficially, I think it's a global problem. You look at COVID. COVID actually exposed the gaps we have in wealth and the economy. Yeah, it also exposed how xenophobic we really are. Look at Malaysia, look at America. When you talk about immigrants, refugees, so it shows this. We actually, and that was something which we actually discussed in my little group there. That maybe one of the things that we have to look at is that we all have our own prejudices. We all have biases, whether we want to admit it to even ourselves. I don't think I'm perfect. I've done some stupid stuff, right? But at the end of the day, it's all about being human, trying to find his or her way on earth. And it could be the wrong way.
Thank you, Dina. But it does seem a little bit warm and fuzzy here. I mean, let's get down to brass tacks. It's speaking about xenophobia and being terrified of somebody who's different than yourself. Do discussions like these actually create a certain sense of Islamophobia, which is being scared towards those who are professing a certain faith, in this case Islam? And if I may ask, you mentioned just now in your presentation about these groups who are pro-Malay, for example, and yet we make it sound like it's something wrong. What's wrong with being pro-Malay? What's wrong with being pro-Chinese? What's wrong with being pro-Indian? What's wrong about sticking up for your community? But now it seems like it's wrong to do so. Some comments, please.
That's a question and a comment that I kept getting, when I interviewed all these people. It's not wrong to push for, to be proud of your culture, your language. But I think in the case of Malaysia, where we have, racism is institutionalized, right? We've got systemic racism in our policies and all that. That we, without realizing it, we're looking at each other, we're othering each other, which is actually very wrong, I remember when I interviewed some academics, they said, look, is it wrong for me to be proud of Bahasa Malaysia? Is it wrong for me to be proud of being Chinese? And what was that pro-Chinese group? I can't pronounce it. Dongzhao. Yeah, Dongzhao, right? Is it wrong for me to believe in that because I am Chinese? I think the fact is, when you talk about Malaysia, right, I think we all have to admit, we've all been victims of racism in our own country, in various ways, whether it's at work, it's at school. But nobody's willing to talk about what really happened to us and whether we want it. You're looking at economic resources, right? Alamak, if I do this, I'm sure I won't get these benefits, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot going for the average Malaysian that's going against the average Malaysian. So if you want, okay, look, all of us are what you call the converted, the intellectual so-called kat Malaysia ni, right? We think, we are working against racism. We want a multicultural country, where people love each other. But it doesn't work that way when our policies also push us against each other.
Thank you, Dina. We'll come back to a little bit on that later, because you are describing almost like a zero-sum situation where people are viewing it that there's no such thing as sharing of the cake, but it's more taking away a piece of cake from somebody else. So we'll get to that in a bit. Thomas, just now, DCP Nora presented a bell curve, and she spoke about the two ends of which there are extremes. And I have a question here from SS Yoga on chat here. It's, we're talking about the two extremes, and then there are people who are extremists, and yet the center, you have people who are content of wanting to be moderate, yet at the same time we do risk this situation where people view that taking care of these extremes takes too much energy. You don't want to go into it. I've got my own life, I don't want to deal with somebody else's life, and you don't want to be able to deal with the extreme views, which are extreme to your own. and there is a need to deal with that. But people are apathetic, people are just thinking it's just too much to deal with. So the question from SS Yoga here, is it possible to tackle these issues of racism and extremism in a way that enables for the majority, which is what we are talking about, right? And that's based on the bell curve that DCP Norma indicated, is able to tackle what approach can be taken in order to bring these extremist views to the moderate side. So if I could ask Thomas, seeing how you are the expert here in dealing with many of these issues of radicalization, please, your comments, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to interview, these are not racist, but terrorists. And many of them have very differing beliefs, and not just in Malaysia, but all around the world. And I know this sounds very cliched, but one of the things I found out is the importance of building bridges. There are commonalities that you can find even with people you think that you will never find any commonalities with. And when you start with those commonalities, it is far more easier to build bridges. I'm not saying it's easy, but I am suggesting that we need to get them to our side. We need to see things from their perspectives, because it could be that they've been hurt, it could be that they have unresolved grievances, and they have just manifested in a way which is legally incorrect. And so while we agree that the way they manifested is wrong, they could have a legitimate grievance. So I find that the starting point is this: we need to accept that sometimes people who do things which are very different and which could be even legally wrong, they might have legitimate grievances to do that. And until that root causes are settled, it's not going to work. You can put them into jail, they will have kids, they will have grandkids, and it's continuing to go on.
It's a generational thing then. Yeah. Okay. So, any questions from the floor? Please just come up to the mic then and ask. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Siti Kasim. I'm hugely disappointed with the panel for not actually zooming on the problem of why racism and extremism starts in this country. Our problem is really our politicians. They are the cause of all this that we are seeing right now in Malaysia. If you like somebody talk about Malay disparities income, if you actually look at the Age Market report on their analysis based on the data released in 2019 household income and basic amenities survey by our own Department of Statistics, it's actually say for Bumiputra earnings, 10K a month is 53.5%. And you compare to the Chinese, who earns 10K a month, is 38.2%, and the Indian is only 8.4%. Whilst the 15K earners for the Bumiputra Malay, 47.5%, and Chinese only 43.5%, Indian only 9%. But when you go down to the B40, a whopping 71.6% are Malays. And then the Chinese, only 18.8%, and the Indian, only 7.4%.
Okay.
Why is this? This is the thing that we need to actually ask our government. Why is there a huge disparity between the top earners and the B40 group? Now, really, just one more. I just want to ask the panel, and especially our ACP, Puan, why is it for someone like Zakir Naik, who caused a lot of problem in Malaysia by, saying bad things about other religions, and he's not being deported when he's wanted in his own country, why are we protecting people like this in our country that cause problems amongst the races?
Okay, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah. So, do you agree, number one, whether politicians are our problem, the politics that are being played in this country, and number two is the policies and the laws in these countries are not, in favor for everybody. It's in favor of one side of the community. So that's
Okay.
my question to the panel.
Thank you. Actually, there was 3 questions in Siti's one pseudo question. I wanted to just add on to a question that come in through the chat, which falls within what she's asking. And the question is, do you think one race dominance or perceived one race dominance in public service affects for an inclusive public policy making in Malaysia? I think it goes into the spirit of the question that Siti was asking. Don't worry, DCP, I'm not going to ask you that question, but let me just take 2 more, and then we'll go on to the questions. Okay, please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum and good afternoon.
Salam.
I'm Munira. First of all, Mr. Thomas, can I just say I love your speech. I'm all about building bridges, and I do believe that kindness and compassion will, eliminate fear, which I think is the main source of racism and division in our country. And then on what ACP Norma mentioned about, things leading to violent terrorism, that's absolutely true. If you go, to New Zealand, where the white extremists supremacists ended up in killing, many Muslims. We need to avoid that because it all stems from the same roots. The question may be for Dina, but echoing what Dr. Azrul mentioned just now, you focused on obviously Malay-Muslim issues and the fears that are the basis of the racism. I just wonder, have we done any studies to see what the fears are amongst Chinese in the Chinese community, in the Indian community, which I feel like I'm sure there are, and it's about understanding these fears. We cannot dismiss them because that's the basis of what people feed to create fear, but understanding them and trying to, like Mr. Thomas said, acknowledge these fears and address them. But what about the other communities? Do we know any of that? Thank you.
Thank you. And final, and then we'll take another round later on. Go ahead.
Okay. Dina, I'm very fascinated with your research and the conversations that you've been having. I'm curious about, the location of the women within the Tanjak Boys and the BMF movements. Like, where are they? Are they having a role? How active are they? Do they have a say? Are they driving the movement? So, if you can just share with us a little bit of that.
Thank you. So we have a bunch of questions here. DCP, you want to go ahead first?
Thank you very much for the question from Puan Siti Kasim. Yes, of course I agree, because you can see in my presentation just now, when I draw the bell curve, the majority people is us, the left extremists and right extremists is the politicians. That's why I said, even though we are majority, but we are very weak from time to time. We'll go back to the ballot box and we vote for those people who give us unfair policies. There is no fairness here. Fairness across the board of the policy that we have in our country. So we are the political master, not the politician. But in our hand, there is such a power for us to vote, but we don't vote intelligently. We vote, I don't know. It's been year in and year out, general election after general election, we choose those people to govern us, because we are so well conditioned, as if they are political master, not us. Okay, so and then I talk about fairness in policy matters by the government. And on Zakir Naik, it's very difficult because this is a policy matters also. It's not. I don't study Zakir Naik. It's the other division that study him, but. Yes. There is a division study about how people think. So Zakir Naik, he has done a lot of damages in terms of the way. I think he has problem of, interpersonal communication skill, because when he replied to answers by the audience, he didn't know how to use that way of explaining things with the intonation. It's all haywire. So that's why sometimes people tend to treat him like an extremist. But I think he's trying to explain things, but the way he communicated back to the audience, that's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, DCP Norma. Dina?
Just in case I forget. All right. Hi, Rosanna. Um, yep. That was actually, just a little snapshot of the research I'm doing. When you talk about Tanjak women, right? There are a few. They're not like, I think there quite a number lah, who do a lot of busana. But they didn't want to be interviewed because they felt that, our liking, baju Melayu, all this busana, it's a very private matter. So basically the doors were closed. And of course, I know COVID isn't an excuse, but the ones who want to talk to me were the men, because they were just so angst-filled. But I think you're right. I did remark to all of them. I said, I feel that there is a gender imbalance here. I need to talk to more women, and that's something I'll have to explore. And hopefully, now that all this is, lifted up, I can start talking. I hope that, answers to you. To the lady at the back, right? I believe there are studies on how young Chinese, how young Indians feel. We did one study a few years ago about hateful extremism, and we actually interviewed young Malaysians across the board in Sabah and Peninsular Malaysia. Whether they were Malays or Chinese or Indians, right? They all felt that hateful extremism or even violent extremism, right? If it was going to justify the means to the ends, they would do so, And again, it popped up, and this is when you realize it's actually a Malaysian stroke global phenomena. The lack of social capital or access to what you could perceive success. If you don't mind me just adding this, we are hoping to raise funds, hint, hint, for a small project for young Indians, working class. The reason is because, a few people came to the office and said, there's a lot of young Indian youth, working class, who are actually looking towards Modi and India as a motherland and taking on very extreme ideas. And I said, this is very fascinating. Why are they doing this? Because they said, look, who can they look up to in Malaysia? There's no one here. Somerville failed them. So they said, why don't you just go back to the motherland? So we're trying to raise funds, but I know when I started asking people, a lot of people said, no, I'm in business, nanti habis, I can't do this. But it is something that we have to look at. We tried also raising money. We see the class divide between, English-educated Chinese and, Chinese-educated Chinese, right? People in Cheras, Bukit Bintang, people in Tropicana and so forth. I think a lot of people didn't want to touch that, especially the Chinese businessmen, because it would affect the businesses. Or two, there was also the thing that, it doesn't matter to me. I don't need to know about them, which is really sad. And the thing is for us, like a lot of think tanks, CSOs, right? A lot of things we want to do, we can't get funding. Donors will come in and say, okay, we want to do this. And you take on certain things because you need to survive. And we'll find ways to squirrel to do this, this kind of need. But I hope that answers you. It's not perfect. I think there's a lot of studies. It's just that it hasn't come out yet. But obviously, there needs to be more done to understand what's happening in Malaysia.
Thank you, Dina. So more scope for research, just not enough funders to fund that research, right? So hopefully those out there listening in and who have some extra money, you can channel it that way. I want to ask a question to Thomas. Thomas, you were once a civil servant, and perhaps you can help answer this question that was raised just now. There is this perception that there is a one-race dominance in our public service, and do you think this affects the way we look at inclusive public policy making in Malaysia? This is a question coming from the chat. And also, if I may also put forward to you, what kind of solutions do you think that we can offer to address racism? And can we use those same approaches to address the issues of radicalism and terrorism, or is this entirely different approaches needed altogether? And this one, if I could also ask DCP Norma to also answer. Go ahead, Thomas.
Thank you. With regards to perhaps one race dominating the public service, I think the numbers speak for themselves. But on the side of the government, there have been a lot of initiatives to bring people from other races in joining into the service, whether it's the civil service, whether it's the military, whether it's the police. I'm not sure how effective those programs have been in getting in the numbers. I think the numbers have only incrementally increased. So we need to look at that. One of the reasons that many of the other races perhaps would not want to join is partly because they look, they might not be career progression. And I think that is something that needs to be looked into. But also, there have been many, many cases in which the other races might have certain distortions about what happens once you join in. Or, you know, it's going to be bad. You know, if you come in or if you have that perception, then it's not going to work. I served the government for 15 years and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the service. I enjoyed the work that I was doing. My colleagues have become my family friends. Their children are my children's friends. And this will go on. So I've benefited tremendously. I also would like to suggest that government service is an excellent form of national service. The country has given us much. And one of the best ways, and oftentimes we tell young people, give 2 years of your life. That means if you never had any intention to join government service, it's okay. We are not asking for all your life, but give 2 years. It's just 24 months. Give 2 years of your life and choose an area where you're not trying to see how you're going to go and advance your career or in terms of monetary gain, but what you can do for the country. Now, let's just assume the premise is this, that we are indeed facing racism, that there are races in this country who are facing racism. Let's look at countries where this has happened. If they've come out of it, it's because people have sacrificed. So I'm suggesting if you really think there is a problem, and if you want to fix it, you must be prepared to sacrifice. If you are not willing to be prepared to sacrifice, then if you are hoping that the side which you already established to be the bad side is going to make the changes for good, I mean, that is beyond logic. So I am suggesting, give your time up in any way. I mean, it need not be formally to actually work in an official position, but the idea is this, in any position that you are in, regardless of your race, your culture, your religion, do something for the country. With regards to, Ashul, your second question, your second question was with regards to...
Use the same approaches to deal with racism as in radicalism and terrorism.
Yeah, so we need the same solutions in the sense that we need more research, as Dina was mentioning. We really desperately need more research. We need more programs in which we can involve the ordinary people. One of the things that we do, and perhaps correctly, like Puan Siti was mentioning, again, that politicians have a lot to be blamed. But I work with young people, and we have already established that politicians are to be blamed. What happens next? I mean, forever we cannot be going on telling them the same line that politicians are supposed to be blamed. What do we do next? How do we strategize? How do we motivate each other? What can we do? What are the strategies? And this, whether it's radicalization or whether it's racism, there are similarities. The idea here is this. In anywhere, we will find that change starts with us. And that's what we are trying to push, particularly with regards to young people.
Just like I mentioned in my talk, racism is enabler of extremism. Okay, so in multicultural and multi-religious country like ours, we said we have racism issues because we are from different race. But racism will breed what? Injustice, right? So in country homogeneous as Mongolia, all Mongolian, there is no other race. Still, if there is injustice, it will also breed something, because all these things will end up create an extreme view of people who've been treated injustly. So I think we have to have a very fair society, very fair policy, so that we can, fulfill everyone's needs accordingly. Just now I put this photo in my slide, a short that short person, if you said to be equal, he don't even have a chance to see the baseball game the other side of the fence. So we have to see this in a very specific perspective and context. But for me, racism is one of the things that can breed extremism and later go into terrorism. Thank you.
Thank you, DCP Norma. Are there any questions here? Yes, please go ahead. Go to the mic. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Koo. I want to be a little provocative. We talk about racism sparking extremism, but maybe I'd like to postulate the possibility that it's extremism that also sparks racism. Let me explain why. 5 years ago,
Very short, Andrew. Very short.
5 years ago, I attended a conference organized by the Malaysian government on de-radicalization and countering violent extremism. Part of the presentation of the Malaysian government at that point in time was to say that the major threats to Malaysia in terms of national security were liberalism, pluralism, and LGBTism. Now, if that's not a form of extremism, I don't know what is. So your comments on that. And then just a question to, based on what Mr. Thomas said. Mr. Thomas in his presentation talked about giving people an alternative space in order to vent without provoking violence. But our laws are such that, you know, if you say something which is sensitive, right, the whole weight of government machinery, including law enforcement, is thrust upon you and you are raided or you are prosecuted to the maximum. So isn't this two forms of extremism which then further engenders racism? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And to respond to that, really, you don't want to touch it, Dina? Oh, you got to process it first, okay. Yeah, it's a little bit loaded, right? It's very nasty of Andrew there. But, you know, and this comes to a question that's been asked here on the chat as well. No? I mean, we have a heterogeneous society here. There's a diversity that exists, which is a form of strength for us. It's something that we are proud of, and most importantly, it's a form of strength also for us as a society, right? Well, how do we start these conversations, you know, that we need to be able to have? And without treading on eggshells and, you know, going into these landmines. I mean, everything seems to be sensitive. But these are conversations that we need to have. Yet we're not having them because we're scared that if we do go into it, we're going to end up into, you know, a conflict or a conversation that we don't want to have, and it's better for us to just mind our own business and be in the box. So how do we go about dealing with the issue that Andrew just raised here, and also some of these questions here that are being raised in this question here? You want to give it a shot, Dina? Yeah?
I think I do agree with what Andrew just said. When you talk about economic extremism, right, political extremism, these do fester racism, or at least prejudices, which are not very healthy for a multicultural country. How are we going to talk about it? I think you have to talk about the elephant in the room. I've always felt that we need to have these difficult conversations, whether we like it or not. It's going to be very tough. You can't, you know, skirt around the issue because, I mean, I remember one time when the DCP Norma there was a forum at one hotel, and people were against SOSMA and all that, and you know, there was a big, I don't know whether you remember it, but there was a big hoo-ha about it. But the thing was that at least, whether you agree with each other or not, it was already out in the open. Now, the next thing is, what are we going to do about it? I feel that we're a privileged lot in this room. We can talk about this over teh tarik or even in this kind of conferences. But to have it with, you know, as Thomas has said, the ordinary Malaysian, you just, I mean, it's not going to be easy, but you have to talk about it, whether you like it or not. You know, what I do like is that I'm seeing more and more young people, right, Malay, Chinese, you know, all that, who are actually accepting these kind of conferences, conversations, who are actually having this really, really hard discussions with their friends. There's a big hoo-ha on Facebook, on WhatsApp. But I'm glad they're taking this, they're doing this, you know. But for us, there's always the tak boleh lah, kesian lah, not nice lah, you know, that, you know, let's not rock the boat. And that's possibly why nothing has changed.
You know, we've been talking about this for decades. I think it even predates even, you know, the 69 racial riots, and even goes back even further down, you know. And when you look at these issues, there is something fundamentally problematic. And maybe that's got to do with the key word that you mentioned in your presentation, Dina, which is confidence. You know, you spoke about how many of the issues concerning identity politics today is based on the individuals involved not having enough confidence in themselves to be able to look at this. And you spoke just now in a way that implies that it's a zero-sum situation, right? That somebody is taking something that you deserve or it's rightfully yours, and therefore you feel that that is an impingement on your right to have. So this is a conversation that we've identified decades ago, and yet we're still having the same conversation. I think Tunku Abdul Rahman himself mentioned this several times in different ways and quotes. So we're coming to the last 15 minutes of the conversation. I want to talk about where can we go from here. Are we going to end up having more of these conversations, more conferences about this for the next 20 years? I mean, how do we move forward?
Can I comment about just now? It doesn't matter whether racism spark extremism or extremism spark racism. There is a philosophy called action-reaction philosophy. In physics, Newton said in the third law of motion, for every force exert from your side, you're gonna receive the same force exert from the other side. So this is what we have problem with. We treated people badly, then we expect them to treat us nicely. Is this what? Ignorance, stupid, or what? So we have to realize this. Okay? There is action-reaction philosophy that we need to take. I ensure that my boys, my officers, when we arrest people, they are innocent until proven guilty. Treat them nicely. You know, if we manage to prove them they are wrong, you know, it will come the times, make things easy for us when we need to rehabilitate them. Because they will remember the good things, the way we treated them during the remand days, they will remember that. And when they are still in the father, the brother, the breadwinner in the prison, who take care of the family? We are. That's why we get that, you know, support when they are out of prison. They become our friends. We become their friends. We are just like families. We take care of each other. Action-reaction philosophy again. Thank you.
Thank you, DCP. So basically, we're talking about reciprocity, right? I mean, do unto others how you wish to be treated. And I can't help but think about your presentation earlier. Again, you mentioned a very important point, which was dignity. And that should also be together with compassion. And Thomas mentioning again and again, you know, in terms of being the importance of kindness, of demonstrating the ability to reach out to somebody else and to be that role model. And this is something that perhaps moving forward, we can actually demonstrate through example, and which you are doing already in the police force. Although honestly, DCP, when you talk about arresting people and putting people in remand, rasa takut sikit lah, you know. But I like it that when you talk about it, you yourself are being that role model that you want to see in treatment of others. And I really like that. Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to bring up that your question that you raised. I think there is a danger sometimes to assume that the government is homogeneous, that everybody in the government thinks the same way and acts the same way. I can tell you that that's seldom times the case. Governments, like civil society, like NGOs, there are people with differing opinions and differing views. So I'm suggesting here that choose the people that you want to educate. Pick them very wisely. Find out who is it that can advocate or champion the cause, because there are such people there. And then once you identify the people that you hope to convince, to persuade, go with wisdom, go with humility. I cannot tell you the number of times that we have decided to engage with certain groups, and we have a tough time convincing our bosses to actually go to the table and engage. And when they finally agree to go to the table and engage, they are confronted with people who accuse them of every single sin under the earth. And they come back and tell us, you see, Thomas, this is why we precisely don't engage them. You see what happens? So I'm suggesting that both sides need to learn wisdom, need to learn humility. If all else fails, sir, join the government and be the change. That's my only other suggestion.
I think Thomas is secretly a recruiting agent for JPA. Do we have any questions from the floor? Looking forward, moving forward. Any questions? Okay, so there's a question here, which is a very important one, and I think all three of you should be able to answer this question. I'll ask you last, Dina. I know you need to process first, okay? So Dina said just now, in this room, it's basically like-minded people. These are the converted already, like the choir. And these are people who we don't need to work so much, I hope, in trying to get around to this agenda of fighting against racism and dealing with radicalization and, of course, terrorism. So the golden question here is, how do we take these conversations that we're having here, the findings contained in the report that is released once a year by Komas, some of these insights that Thomas and DCP Norma have been sharing with us here today, outside of this conference hall? How do we actually get to the people who matter, the actual stakeholders, the people who need to be changed? How do we get that going on? I mean, what does it take? I've heard some solutions already from DCP Norma, which is a demonstration of proof, basically by example, which is a great way to go ahead. But how do we go about it in a systematic way? Because Thomas over there sounds like he's having problems because his bosses said, I don't want to be there precisely because I'm going to enter that conversation. But that's precisely why they should go. So how do you go about to actually
Start
carry
with
this
yourself.
conversation? Go ahead, DCP.
Start with yourself. Okay? You have start with yourself, and then the smallest social unit that we have in our society, the family. And then all these concept, principle can spread. You know, you have extended families. So start with yourself. As easy as that. I start with myself. We used to have different approach, but when I took over, I bring this back, you know, the right approach.
So when you say yourself, it also includes family, right? I mean, can we have these kind of discussions that we're having here with our family members? Because I know a lot of family members can be racist.
Yes. We start with our family. We are supposed to teach them all these things. I'm alone. I'm single. So, but my my nieces, nephew, all have been, I don't know what to say, radicalized by me in terms of these fairness issues, racism. But I encourage them to be good, be damn good until people cannot ignore you. Not because of your race, but because you are good.
Deeds.
Yeah.
Actions.
Yes. So.
Thank you. DCP. Thomas, go ahead.
We go a lot to schools, we go a lot to young people, and the key indicator is this: when the people do not want you, that's the group that you're supposed to meet and engage.
Oh, okay.
So you can tell from their reaction, that's how you know that you're needed there.
Thank you, Thomas. And tell me, does that include politicians as well? I mean, they want us during the election period, but don't want us any other day.
I do apologize, Azrul. Politicians is not my field of study.
So look at that, cop out, man. It's just cop out. Right? Thank you, Thomas. Dina, go ahead.
How I usually approach my work is really this. I'm curious about people. And I think also, I like to find the humor in it, Of course, a lot of things are like, wow, what do you do to what you do? But I think when you approach a lot of things with a lot of humor, curiosity, genuine curiosity, you don't impose, right? Even though sometimes you wonder why they do that, it actually opens a lot of doors. And well, I'm from Terengganu, so my family is very noisy, whether you will like it or not. Okay, lah, we'll start insulting each other and all that. So my family is a little bit different, but I think you have to have that openness. And if people reject you, okay lah, you don't listen, sudah lah, you know. But if you have to go back to that person, you got to find another way. But sometimes it depends on my mood also lah. Kalau penat-penat, malah, you know. But just go out there and have fun. I mean, that's how I approach my work, because the work we do is so intense. I don't think I can approach the work from that.
Well, let me ask you, because you're the head of a think tank, which is doing quite important research, which is arguably groundbreaking in many respects. It's giving us new insights into new developments that are looking at issues like radicalism and extremism and so forth. How are you taking your findings from your research to making an impact or change outside of the research conferences and papers that you've been published?
Well, my friends don't exactly want to hear, because a few times I did tell them about our findings, it frightened them. So they were like, oh my God, don't tell us anymore. But you know, you try to have, I mean, not all my friends lah, can. I mean, I have conversations with some friends and we argue, you know. There are some who are genuinely frightened by the findings and they're, alamak, macam mana ni? You know, you just have this conversation. I mean, of course, I don't talk about this all the time, you know. Out of work, I try to detach, can. But you try to find ways. I know the team has done little videos on YouTube and they actually appeal to a young me. For my age group, 50s and above, I think tengok macam mana lah. If it's my dad and his friends, they're very political. They want to know what young people think, right? My mom and the friends, more like, oh my God, is this going to land us, you know, in neraka ke syurga ke? What is right, what is wrong? Okay? You have to look at the people lah, you know. If you're going to end up with a group that's not interested listening to this, sometimes you cut your losses, sometimes you have to think, how do I get through to these people? Yeah.
Thank you, Dina. So we're coming to the very last few minutes of the discussion this afternoon, and I'm sure you agree with me that it's been very interesting. I just want our panelists to give a few words about, as a closing statement, on recruiting champions. You know, finding champions amongst those who we can bring in to help spread the message of, you know, of anti-racism, de-radicalization, and to take a stand, basically. Are there champions to begin with? Are there enough champions? And how can we recruit more people into the fold? So, DCP Noma, I'll give you a chance, and then there'll be your final statement as well. Go ahead.
We have thousands, millions of champions at our primary school. Go and teach these young children to be good to others. That's it. Thank you.
Love it. Love it. Start young from primary school even. Thank you. That's really good advice. Thomas?
Give me a minute, Dina. Could you go?
Okay. Dina?
Start young. And I have a lot of faith in the young activists, you know. They're always teaching us the latest, you know, this is how young people think, this is how you should approach. That book or that little study that I'm doing now, I'm learning so much from young men, young women who tell me that's not how we view the world. This is how you should approach Islam. I mean, I met one, she used to be with Ikram, now she's with Sisters in Islam, Huda, right? She's told me about that, you know. I'm learning a lot from young people, and I thank them for putting me on the street and narrow, you know, instead of being on this makcik nenek kan, tak tahu apa, you know. So yeah, the young will rule.
Thank you, Dina. And Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, so something that I'm talking from my radicalization background. So we had a situation once in which there was a particular individual in Afghanistan who was shot. Now the Americans knew that he was a very high profile target, and they knew that he had did something really bad, but they didn't know what. But unfortunately he was badly shot, and they were not sure whether he was going to live. So they actually sent an agent, Ali Saufan. Ali Saufan was the chap who related to me the story. They actually sent Ali Saufan to go there and collect him. Now, they were not sure whether he would survive the trip from Afghanistan back to US, so they requested that he be brought to Thailand. And so there's a secret flight to an airport in Bangkok. He went there, and he came out, and because he was badly hurt, he was shot in the groin, and he was defecating. And Ali Saufan was the chap who was supposed to interrogate him. But when he went there, he saw his situation. He was in pain, and he was defecating, he was soiled. And so Ali Saufan said, before we start anything, before we do any interrogation, let me clean you up. And he cleaned him up. And this man was so shocked, and he decided to tell every single thing. And they found him to be a very important source of information for the whole 9/11. So Ali Saufan is relaying all this information back to the States, and and people in the States are so happy because you just got them in less than 1 hour, they got this much information. And they were thinking, gosh, we're going to get him as prisoner, so much more information we're going to get. They brought him to Guantanamo, and he never said a word after that. Why? And he actually told, that previous guy was kind to me. And that, these hardcore terrorists, we're talking about hardcore terrorists, all that required him to change was kindness. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. Ladies and gentlemen, this ends our forum for this afternoon. Please give a round of applause to Dina Zaman, DCP Norma, and Thomas Tamra. So with that, we end this interesting discussion. I hope you had fun and had learned quite a bit. I certainly have. And I now pass it back to the organizers of the conference. Please go ahead.